My name is Clara Vance, and at 28, I thought I understood the quiet architecture of my life. Its foundations were built on memory, its walls shaped by a love I carried like a constant, low hum in my chest. I worked in brand strategy, helping companies find their authentic voice, a skill I'm not sure I ever truly applied to myself. Not until the day the life I knew was dismantled and laid bare on a damp, green lawn. To understand that rain-slicked afternoon in Port Meridian, you have to understand the house on Willow Creek Lane. It wasn't just a structure of wood and plaster, it was the geography of my childhood. After my mother passed from a swift and silent illness when I was 5, the house became a two-person kingdom for my father, Arthur, and me. He was a builder, not of sprawling, impersonal developments, but of homes with character and soul. His company, Vance and Sterling Artisans, was known for its respect for old materials and timeless design. He smelled of sawdust and lemon tea, and his hands, though calloused, could fix anything from a leaky faucet to a broken heart. Those were the golden years. We'd spend summer evenings on the back porch, tracing constellations he taught me to find. He'd point with a sturdy finger at the sky. "See, Clara," he'd say, his voice a gentle rumble, "Cassiopeia, the queen. She's always there, watching over everything. You just have to know where to look." In winter, we'd huddle by the hearth he'd built himself, the firelight dancing across the spines of his worn books. He built more than our home. He built my world. When I was 13, that world tilted. Arthur married Eleanor. In the soft glow of their courtship, she was all warm smiles and thoughtful gestures, bringing me little watercolor sets and asking about the poetry I was attempting to write. Looking back, I see it was a performance, a beautifully constructed facade. The day she moved in, bringing her 2 children, the atmosphere in our home shifted. It was a subtle change, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. Leo, at 15, carried himself with a restless, simmering arrogance, while 11-year-old Chloe was a mirror of her mother, all surface-level sweetness with a cool, appraising gaze. From that day on, an invisible line was drawn. Eleanor's affection was a spotlight that shone exclusively on her children. I became a resident ghost, tolerated but rarely seen. At the dinner table, Leo's stories of his football practice would dominate the conversation, and Chloe would be praised for a drawing, while my own achievements were met with a polite, vacant nod. My birthday, once a day of special, quiet celebration with my dad, became an afterthought, often remembered with a hastily bought cake after he came home from work and saw the disappointment in my eyes. Arthur tried. He saw the subtle chilling of the air and did his best to create pockets of warmth for me. He'd pull me aside after dinner. "Let's go check on the garden," he'd say, and for a half hour, under the deepening sky, it would be just us again. These moments, however, only seemed to sharpen Eleanor's resentment. I was a relic of a past she wanted to overwrite, a constant reminder that she was not his first or only love. When I turned 17, Dad began a new ritual. He'd take me to a small, sunlit office on Saturday mornings, clear a space on his large oak desk, and teach me about the foundations of self-reliance. "It's not just about money, Clara," he explained, sketching columns on a notepad. "It's about independence. It's knowing you can stand on your own 2 feet, no matter which way the wind blows." He opened a modest portfolio for me, teaching me not just about stocks and bonds, but about the philosophy of patient, steady growth. He made the complex world of finance feel like another form of craftsmanship, another way to build something lasting. Leaving for a university 3 hours north in the coastal city of Fairview was both a liberation and a heartbreak. I chose their arts program for its reputation, but I also chose the distance. I needed air. Still, I never missed our bi-weekly calls, and my monthly visits home became a lifeline, carefully timed for weekends when Eleanor and her children were visiting her family out of state. During my final year of college, Vance and Sterling landed a landmark project restoring a series of historic brownstones by the river. Arthur's success grew, but his vision remained grounded. He began planning his final, most personal project, a residential building downtown, one that felt more like a vertical village than a block of condos. He'd unroll the blueprints on the dining room table during my visits. "We're not just building apartments, Clara," he'd say, his eyes alight with passion. "We're building a place for lives to unfold. A place with a heart." After graduating, I took a position at Helios Creative, a small but respected brand strategy agency in Port Meridian. I shared a drafty but charming apartment with my college friend, Maya. The investment account Dad had started for me had grown, and I could have afforded a place of my own, but I was carefully saving for a down payment on a small house, a dream I'd held close for years. Then, 3 years ago, on a Tuesday that felt no different from any other, the world stopped turning. Dad called and asked to meet me for lunch at the Gilded Sparrow, our favorite little bistro. His voice was thin, like a frayed thread. When I saw him sitting at our usual corner table, a cold dread washed over me. He was a man who had always seemed carved from oak, strong and enduring, but now he looked fragile, his usual vibrant complexion replaced by a pale, papery thinness. "It's pancreatic," he said, his voice barely a whisper before I could even ask. "Stage 4. He explained the diagnosis with the same calm precision he used to explain blueprints, but his hands trembled slightly as he folded his napkin. The doctors had given him a year, maybe less. He held on for 10 beautiful, heartbreaking months. I reduced my hours at Helios, spending afternoons reading to him on the porch, our roles reversed. Eleanor seemed genuinely adrift, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Leo and Chloe, however, were conspicuously absent, their visits brief and their concerns seemingly focused on the future of his estate. A month before he passed, he asked me to come to his office alone. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. He handed me a small, polished rosewood box. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was an ornate, old-fashioned brass key and a slim folder of documents. "I've made arrangements, sweetheart," he said, his voice raspy. "The house on Willow Creek will go to Eleanor. It's only right. And there's enough for all 3 of you to live there if you need to. But I'm not blind, Clara. I know it hasn't been easy for you." He pressed the box into my hand. "This is your foundation. Your safe harbor. When the time is right, you'll know. Don't use it a moment before you have to." The reading of the will confirmed his words. The house went to Eleanor along with a substantial insurance policy. Leo and Chloe were beneficiaries of trusts that would mature on their 30th birthdays. I received a minority stake in Vance and Sterling to be overseen by his longtime partner, Mr. Sterling, until I felt ready to take a more active role. And I had the rosewood box, with its mysterious key, which I wore on a silver chain around my neck, a secret promise resting against my skin. For 2 years, I stayed. I stayed out of a sense of duty to my father's memory, a foolish hope that the family he had tried to build might somehow cohere in his absence. I stayed to keep an eye on Eleanor, whose own health began a slow, sad decline after he was gone. I paid a significant portion of my salary each month for household expenses, later learning I was contributing far more than Leo, who worked sporadically as a car salesman, and Chloe, who drifted between unpaid internships in the fashion industry. The house, once a sanctuary, became a territory of unspoken rules and simmering resentments. As Eleanor grew more frail, she became more reliant on her children, and they, in turn, used her dependence to seize control. The air grew thick with their assumptions, their casual dismissals of me. Still, I stayed, telling myself it was what Dad would have wanted. Then came the business trip. Helios had sent me to Seattle to finalize a major partnership with a sustainable tech company. The 2 weeks were a whirlwind of success. I felt competent, valued, and alive. I flew home on a cloud of accomplishment, utterly oblivious to the storm that had been gathering on Willow Creek Lane. The taxi turned onto my street, the familiar trees dripping with a soft, persistent rain. "Miss," the driver asked, his voice hesitant. Are you having a yard sale?" I followed his gaze and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a yard sale. It was my life, strewn across the lawn like wreckage after a flood. My clothes, my books, my antique writing desk, my mother's music box, all of it was scattered, soaking in the steady drizzle. "There must be a mistake," I murmured, my voice a stranger's. I paid the driver in a daze and stepped out of the car. The rain felt cold on my face. My feet carried me across the wet grass to a pile of my favorite novels, their pages swollen and warped. I knelt and picked up a small, silver-framed photo of Dad and me, taken on my college graduation day. A crack ran through the glass, right across his smiling face. Taped to the back was a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was Chloe's, neat and cruel. "Your space is downstairs now, if you want it." Paralyzed, I looked up at the house. The front door opened. Leo stood there, arms crossed over his chest, a look of smug triumph on his face. Chloe hovered behind him, a flicker of something, guilt? Satisfaction, in her eyes. "Took you long enough," Leo said, his voice casual. We were about to start hauling this junk to the curb. "What is this?" I asked, my own voice barely a whisper. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. "Leo, what have you done? Where is Eleanor?" Chloe stepped forward, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Mom needs round-the-clock care now. We're moving her to a private facility. We've decided to convert the house into 2 separate units. Leo's taking the ground floor, I'm taking the top. And you," Leo added with a smirk, "can have the basement. It's unfinished, but I'm sure you're resourceful. Or you can leave. Your call." "You can't do this," I said, the words feeling useless and small. I looked around at the pieces of my life, my history, being slowly destroyed by the rain. "I live here. I contribute." "The house is in Mom's name," Chloe replied, her voice coolly logical. "And she's given us power of attorney. This is our decision." I knew, with a sickening certainty, that Eleanor, in her confused and fragile state, had likely not agreed to this at all. This was their own cruel design. "I need to see her." Leo blocked the doorway. "She's resting. She doesn't need you upsetting her. She's tired of you living here anyway. It's been a burden." A burden. The word struck me with physical force. I had cooked, I had cleaned, I had paid bills, I had sat with Eleanor for hours when her own children were out living their lives. A burden. I repeated, disbelief turning to a slow-burning anger. "I pay my own way and then some. Who do you think has been keeping this house afloat?" "Whatever," Leo scoffed. "You have until morning. Basement or bust. Anything left on this lawn is going in a dumpster." The humiliation was a physical weight. I saw Mrs. Gable from next door peering through her curtains. A group of teenagers on bikes had stopped down the street, watching the spectacle. Then a fresh wave of panic hit me. My work laptop. My mother's jewelry. "My laptop," I said, my voice rising. "And the wooden box on my dresser. Where are they?" Leo shrugged. "Probably in one of those boxes. Who knows? Things get lost in a move." The calculated indifference in his voice told me it was no accident. As I began a frantic search, Chloe followed me, her tone dripping with a venom she'd kept hidden for years. "I never understood why Arthur insisted on keeping you around," she said softly. "He should have just let you go when Mom came along. It would have been cleaner." The words were meant to break me, but something inside me solidified. I stopped, turned, and looked her straight in the eye. "He was my father," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "This was our home. You were the guests." "Well, the guests own the place now," she retorted. "And you're not family. You never were." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed Maya. "Clara. How is Seattle?" her cheerful voice answered. "Maya," I whispered, the composure finally shattering. "I need you." They threw me out." There was a beat of stunned silence. "Who? What are you talking about?" "Leo and Chloe. All my things are on the lawn. They've locked me out." "I'm on my way," she said, her voice turning to steel. "Don't you move. Don't talk to them." "I'm coming." While I waited, I tried to salvage what I could, wrapping precious things in my raincoat. Leo watched from the porch, a king surveying his conquered territory. "By the way," he called out, "if you do take the basement, your rent is going up. We figure $2,000 a month is fair, considering your promotion." I just stared at him, the sheer audacity of it all leaving me speechless. My business trip, my success, had been the trigger. They saw me not as a sister, but as a resource to be squeezed. When Maya's car screeched to a halt, she didn't even turn off the engine before she was out and wrapping her arms around me. Monsters, she seethed, looking from my things to the house. Absolute monsters. Together, under the relentless rain, we began the heartbreaking task of loading the remnants of my life into her hatchback and my small sedan. As we worked, my fingers brushed against the chain around my neck. I closed my hand around the key, its metal cool against my skin. When the time is right. The time was now. As we drove away, I didn't look back. The house on Willow Creek Lane was no longer a home. It was a museum of a life that no longer existed. In the silence of the car, with the rain beating against the roof, I made a quiet vow. I would not be defined by their cruelty. I would build something new. We carried the damp, sad-smelling boxes into Maya's small apartment. Wrapped in a warm blanket, clutching a mug of tea she'd made, I finally told her about the rosewood box and the key. I showed her the small tag attached to its ring, 21B. And the business card tucked into the folder, the Ethelgard. Riverfront Residences. Port Meridian. Maya's eyes grew wide. The Ethelgard? Clara, that's that stunning old building they restored downtown. The one that looks like something out of a fairy tale. She looked from the key to my face. You don't think? There's only one way to find out, I said, a flicker of my father's quiet resolve igniting within me. The next morning, I stood before the Ethelgard. It was even more beautiful up close, a masterpiece of restored Gothic Revival architecture, its carved stone facade and elegant archways a testament to a bygone era of craftsmanship. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed open the heavy brass and glass doors into a lobby that silenced the city's clamor. It was all warm wood, soft lighting, and the faint, clean scent of beeswax. I approached the concierge desk, where a kind-faced man with silver hair and warm, intelligent eyes looked up from a large ledger. Good morning, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My name is Clara Vance. My father, Arthur Vance. He may have left something for me here. The man's face broke into a gentle smile. Miss Vance. Of course. We've been waiting for you. He extended a hand over the polished mahogany desk. My name is Mr. Alastair. Your father was a remarkable man. He spoke of you often during the final stages of the restoration. He made a quiet call, and a moment later, a woman with a calm, reassuring presence joined us. Miss Vance, I'm Helen Croft, the building manager. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. She handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope, my name written on it in my father's familiar, architectural script. With trembling fingers, I broke the wax seal. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then the time has come. The wind has blown in a direction I feared, but prepared for. I always knew, my love, that the ties I tried to weave in that house were fragile. A heart can be a stubborn thing, and Eleanor's, I'm afraid, was always reserved for her own. I couldn't bear the thought of you ever feeling adrift. So I built you a safe harbor. The Ethelgard was my last love letter to the city, and to you. Apartment 21B is yours, my darling. It is paid for in full. The maintenance fees, the taxes, all of it is taken care of for the next decade, a running start for you. The on the tag stands for Ethelgard, of course. But it also stands for Arthur. A little piece of me always here. I hope, with all my heart, that you found a way for the family to hold. But I am a builder, and a builder always accounts for the storm. This is your foundation now, Clara. Your sanctuary. No one can ever take it from you. All my love, always. Dad. Tears blurred the ink. Helen quietly passed me a linen handkerchief. He was very particular about every detail, she said softly. Mr. Alastair escorted me to the elevator. We rode in silence to the 21st floor. He led me down a quiet, carpeted hallway to a dark wood door with a simple brass plaque, 21B. Welcome home, Miss Vance, he said, his voice full of warmth. I slid the brass key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, solid click. The door swung inward, and I forgot to breathe. The apartment was awash of light. Floor-to-ceiling arched windows framed a breathtaking panorama of the Meridian River and the city's skyline beyond. The afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating a space that was the perfect blend of modern comfort and timeless elegance. The walls were painted in soft, calming shades of sea glass and slate. Bookshelves, built into an alcove, were filled with the works of my favorite poets and authors. And on a small table by the window, in a simple silver frame, was a picture of my mother, young and smiling, a photo I thought had been lost years ago. I walked through the apartment in a reverie. The kitchen was a dream of clean lines and warm wood. The second bedroom had been converted into a perfect home office, the desk positioned to overlook the river. In the master bedroom, the closet held a few high-quality basics, a soft cashmere sweater, a perfectly tailored coat, all in my size. My father had not just provided a space, he had woven my essence into its very fabric. Alone, I sank onto the plush sofa, the city spread out before me like a promise. My father, with his quiet foresight and boundless love, had known. He had known I would need this. And I, in my stubborn determination to honor a version of family that never truly existed, had endured years of quiet erosion, all while this sanctuary waited for me. The next few days were a blur of setting up my new life. I returned to the house on Willow Creek Lane late at night, when I knew Leo and Chloe would be out. With a flashlight, I carefully went through the dumpsters they'd had delivered. It was a humiliating task, but I managed to rescue more photo albums, important documents, and a few sentimental treasures they had carelessly discarded. The irony of my situation was staggering. I had been paying exorbitant rent to live in a house where I was treated as an intruder, all while I owned this beautiful apartment outright. A week after moving in, I met with my father's lawyer, a kind, sharp-witted man named Mr. Davies. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said, echoing the words of Mr. Alastair. "Your father was very clear. I was not to reach out. He said you would find your own way to me when the time was right." He explained the full scope of my father's foresight. My minority stake in Vance and Sterling generated significant quarterly dividends, which had been accumulating in a trust account. Furthermore, I learned that many of the family home's major expenses, the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, were being paid directly from a business account funded by my father's initial estate, an account I now had the authority to modify. So, I said, the pieces clicking into place, the business I partially own has been paying thousands of dollars a month to maintain the house I was just evicted from. "Your father wanted to ensure everyone's comfort," Mr. Davies said gently. "But he stipulated that the arrangement was at your discretion should circumstances change. And I believe we can agree, Ms. Vance, that circumstances have changed." I left his office not with a sense of vengeance, but with a quiet, steely resolve. I would not be cruel, but I would no longer be a crutch. That night, I called Mr. Davies and laid out a plan. We would establish a 3-month transition. For the first month, the support would be reduced by half. The second month, by half again. By the third month, all financial support from the business accounts would cease, except for a private trust one would establish, paid directly to Eleanor's care facility, to cover any needs her insurance didn't. Leo and Chloe would never know of it. This was for my father's wife, not for them. "This is more than fair, Clara," Mr. Davies said. "It is generous." "It's not about generosity," I replied. "It's about closing a chapter with dignity. Mine, not theirs." In the months that followed, my life began to blossom in the light and air of the Ethelgard. I resigned from Helios Creative and launched my own consultancy from my beautiful home office. I called it Lumen Narratives, a nod to bringing authentic stories to light. I found I was more creative, more focused, and more successful on my own terms. The Ethelgard truly was a community. I formed a fast friendship with the Abernethys, a warm, retired couple next door who had known my father and shared stories of his excitement about the project. I started going for morning runs along the river with Julian Croft, a brilliant young architect who, in a stroke of beautiful serendipity, had apprenticed with my father on the Ethelgard's restoration. Our shared respect for my father's legacy grew into a quiet, easy love. News of my old life trickled in. The first was a furious, rambling text from Leo a month after I'd moved. The mortgage was past due. What was going on? I replied with a single, calm email explaining that my financial contributions had ended and that they would need to make their own arrangements. His response was a string of vitriolic accusations that I simply deleted. Mrs. Gable called, her voice laced with concern, to tell me a foreclosure notice had been posted on the door of the house on Willow Creek Lane. A former colleague mentioned that Leo had been fired from his job for erratic behavior. Maya saw Chloe's social media, a desperate performance of a glamorous life financed by dwindling credit. I felt a distant sadness, but not guilt. I wasn't the cause of their collapse, I had simply removed the safety net. Their choices were their own. As Julian wisely said one evening as we shared dinner on my balcony, overlooking the glittering city, "This isn't about revenge, Clara. It's about boundaries. You didn't set their house on fire, you just stopped paying their fire insurance." Almost a year to the day after I had found my life on the lawn, Julian and I were returning from a celebratory dinner. Lumen Narratives had just landed a major national client. As we walked into the warm, quiet lobby of the Ethelgard, my heart stopped. There, in the waiting area, sat Leo and Chloe. They looked diminished. Leo was unshaven, his expensive suit rumpled. Chloe's designer clothes looked tired, and her eyes were shadowed with a desperation that her practiced smile couldn't hide. They saw me and rushed forward. Mr. Alastair moved swiftly from behind his desk, a silent, protective presence. "Clara," Chloe began, her voice straining for a sweetness it no longer possessed. "We need to talk to you." "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said, my voice calm. Julian's hand found mine, a quiet anchor. "The house is gone," Leo blurted out, his voice raw. "The auction was last week. We have nowhere to go." "Mom's in a state-run facility now," Chloe added, tears welling in her eyes. "We couldn't afford the private care anymore." I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry to hear that things have been difficult. But the choices that led you here were your own." "Choices?" Leo's voice rose. "You cut us off. Dad would be ashamed of you, living in this palace while his family is on the street." "My father," I said, my voice low and clear, "would be ashamed of how you treated his daughter. He wanted us to be a family, Leo. That requires respect. Kindness. You threw my life onto a lawn in the rain. It was a mistake." Chloe cried. "We were grieving. We were stressed. We're still family, Clara. We can move in here. We can help. We can start over." The sheer, breathtaking entitlement of the suggestion almost made me laugh. They hadn't learned a thing. They didn't see me, they saw a solution. A resource. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it was made of steel. "That will not be happening. My home is not a consequence for you to escape. It is my sanctuary." Leo's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You selfish." He took a step toward me, his hand raised as if to grab my arm. Mr. Alastair was there in an instant, a solid, immovable presence between us. "Sir," he said, his voice polite but unyielding, "I must ask you to leave." "This is a family matter," Leo shouted. "This is a private residence," Mr. Alastair corrected gently. "And you are no longer welcome." Defeated, they turned to go. As they reached the door, Chloe looked back, her face a mess of tears and confusion. It was the first time I had ever seen a genuine crack in her facade. In the weeks that followed, there was only silence. The house on Willow Creek Lane was sold. Through Mr. Davies, I made sure my anonymous trust for Eleanor's care was secure. Life at the Ethelgard continued its peaceful, happy rhythm. Lumen Narratives grew. Julian and I started talking about the future, about building a life together. The sharp edges of the betrayal began to soften, replaced by a deep, quiet gratitude for the path it had forced me onto. Then, 2 months after the confrontation in the lobby, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. It was cream-colored, like the one my father had left for me, but the handwriting was Chloe's. For a full day, I left it on the kitchen counter, unsure if I was ready to open it. That evening, with Julian by my side, I finally did. It wasn't a demand or an accusation. It wasn't even a full apology, not in the way one might expect. It was just a few short, messy sentences. "Clara, I know you have no reason to listen to me. What we did was wrong. I see that now. Leo is. He is who he is. But I am trying to be someone different. I got a job. A real one. I visit Mom every week. Thank you for making sure she is cared for. I know it was you. You are more my father's daughter than I ever was. Chloe. I folded the letter and looked out at the river, the city lights shimmering on the dark water like a fallen constellation. I didn't know if I would ever write back. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible or even necessary. Some foundations, once broken, can't be rebuilt in the same way. But as I stood there, wrapped in the warmth of Julian's arm, in the sanctuary my father had built for me, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been about losing a house, but finding a home. It was about discovering that family isn't always about the blood you share, but about the respect you give, the kindness you offer, and the love you choose to build with. My father had taught me to build on solid ground, and I finally understood. The most important foundation, the one no storm could ever wash away, was the one I had finally built within myself.